All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching our ExxonMobil video here. What happens after your cube pick? My name's Nick Stenger. We are Stenger Family Office. For the past 44 years now, the Stenger family has worked with ExxonMobil retirees leading up to retirement, at retirement, and then after retirement, of course. And we've developed a process that's designed to help you get to the point of retirement at the company. We know the plan inside and out, and we can help you navigate the retirement journey successfully. I want to show you a couple of slides today that I think will actually help you understand the process of retirement and what retirement looks like, what the accounts look like after the fact. And while a lot of videos we've done in the past have been high level, talking about the generalities of retirement planning with ExxonMobil, this is going to be very specific and show you the step-by-step process of what it really looks like. So I hope you find this video helpful. Just a couple notes about Stenger Family Office. We date back to 1981. We were legacy Morgan Stanley. Dean Witter, actually, before that, we were a top tier team at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. And we're up here. Our headquarters office is in Naperville, Illinois, right down the street from Joliet, where the refinery is. And so that's how we got started with ExxonMobil, really Mobil Oil, all those years ago. And then that became the Cicero Lube plant. And now our other office is in Spring, Texas, right across the street from campus where most of our clients are today. And then we've got a quickly growing office in Baton Rouge, so right downtown Baton Rouge, so that we can be close to our Exxon families as well. We are a multi-family office structure, and what matters about that is the fact that we've got everything you need right in one place. So yes, we do the investments, of course. Yes, of course, we do the financial planning, but we also have a whole team of tax folks and estate planning folks. Everybody is here to put a comprehensive plan together for you and your family. Here's a few of our offices. Of course, Naperville is there on the bottom, and then we've got a Chicago office in case you are in the city, and we have an office in Spring, like I mentioned, on the fourth floor of the same building where Common Bond is, if you know where that restaurant is, across from campus, and then Baton Rouge as well, right downtown. We are a top wealth advisor team, ranked by Forbes, been on the list since its inception in 2016. And so that's just a little bit about us. And again, before we jump in, I want to show you a little bit more about the family office structure. Your family is in the center of what we do. We want to create a plan for you and then bring in the right resources around your family to make sure that you can navigate retirement. While stitching things together on paper looks pretty good, you can get a wealth advisor and a tax person and estate planner and piece it together. It rarely works in actuality. We've been doing this a long enough time now to know and seen many families, 4 generations of the same family now through retirement, to tell you that you need to have a team of people operating together. So that's why we operate as a family office. Let's go ahead and we're going to jump right in here to the ExxonMobil items. I want to give you 2 checklists. One is a pre-retirement checklist that's on the screen in front of you. And what I would recommend is that you start with comprehensive financial planning way before you decide to retire. So some of our clients get to us the same year they're going to retire. They're like, Nick, I'm retiring in 6 months. Let's put a plan together. That's great. But it's even better if we can start this process 2 to 3, maybe even 5 years out. We even have a number of clients who are in their 40s with us who are going to be there for another 10, 15, sometimes even 20 years that are putting a plan together now. And the earlier you start, the better. But the very first thing you should do before you make any decisions is whether you meet with our team or meet with another fiduciary financial advisor, make sure you know where you stand. You're going to answer some basic questions like, do I have enough to retire? We're not going to cover that today, but do I have enough to retire? Do I know where I stand from an income standpoint, for example? Those are all the big questions. Then the second thing that I'd like you to do is rebalance your Voya 401k. We provide that advice at no extra cost as long as you have a starter account with our group. So if you start with $1,000 even, we're going to link up your Voya 401k with our system. We can't do anything, make any of the changes for you, but we can at least see it and then give you advice and say, hey, let's rebalance here or there throughout the years before you retire. And then one of the other big factors is if you're starting to receive RSUs, and many of our clients are receiving a lot of RSUs, restricted stock, we want to make sure that you're in a good spot to understand what the tax implications are going to be, how that's going to impact your plan long run. That's a very important piece of this. And then the 2 last pieces before you actually retire is look at your pension plan And now the system is called Alight, ALIGHT. And I want you to run a plan projection, whether you're going to take a lump sum or annuity or something else. I'd like you to look at that ahead of time so that we've got some good analysis on where you stand long term. We're also going to look at healthcare for you. Now, retiring from ExxonMobil, keeping the retiree medical plan is actually a very, very good move in most cases. In some cases, it's not a good move, but in most cases, the retiree healthcare is an excellent, excellent plan. We've literally had clients who have been retired now from ExxonMobil for 20, 30 plus years, and they haven't had any issues with it. It's been tremendous. So that's a great benefit that you have, especially if you're going to retire before 65, like most of our Exxon families will. And then at retirement, when you get to the point where you're actually going to click some of the buttons in the system and retire, one of the first things you have to do is determine your retirement date, and you're going to have to notify your supervisor. They're going to approve you in the system, and then that's going to open up our window to go into Alight, like I mentioned. Alight's the place where we're going to pick our pension plan options and our healthcare options. So that's the next step there. We're going to do one last rebalance before you retire, and I'll show you an example of this in a second. But we're going to do one last Voya rebalance, and that's very important to get you ready for the point where eventually you may want to do a rollover. You've got some options. You don't have to roll over the 401k, but we can talk about some of the pros and cons there. And then the last but not least item is, what do you do with Voya after you leave Exxon? And everybody's got an opinion there that we can discuss. So let's talk about the rebalancing of the Voya 401k before you actually retire. And I think there's three major buckets that you're going to look at, timeframes you're going to look at. One is the 3+ years to retirement zone. And this also gets customized depending on how old you are, what your risk appetite is. But I would say in general, if you're 3+ years out from retirement, you should be mostly equities in your plan. You're going to have the lump sum, which is a very safe fixed asset. It's just a cash deposit essentially that goes into an IRA account for you. And so I would say, on the Voya side of things, that allows you to be mostly equities and grow the portfolio. Now, if you go back over 200 years of market history, the market has recovered all of its losses, even the worst environments like COVID in 08 and 09 and 1987 and all the rest of them, in about 24 months. And so if you're 3 years out, I still think you've got a long enough window to be mostly equities. But talk about that with your advisor on your individual plan. Then the second time zone is going to be that 1 to 3 year zone before retirement. That's where I'd say you want to start having some common assets. It's a fixed account, not quite as safe as a money market, but pretty darn safe. And it carries a constant price per share. And I found that common assets are very helpful right before you retire. And then we can talk about the amount on an individual level that you should have. And then 3 months before retirement or less, now you're getting in the zone where we typically like to increase common assets just to give ourselves some predictability. Now, if the market's really low, we're not going to do that. If the market's really high, we may do more of that to take advantage of the higher prices. But we just want to give you some stability and predictability right before you go to retire and do the rollover. So a few other things that we're going to talk about now on Voya are going to be NUA, that's net unrealized appreciation. Number 2, what do you do pre-tax versus after-tax? And then number 3, should you do an in-plan Roth conversion? Let's talk about NUA. This is net unrealized appreciation. NUA gets overcomplicated, but really all it is it's the difference between the cost basis, what you paid for your Exxon stock, versus what it's worth today. So if it's worth 114 or 113 a share today, and you paid 50 a share, the difference there, that gain is considered net unrealized appreciation. So one of the things that can help you from a tax standpoint, depending on your personal situation, is NUA gets taxed at a different rate than the cost basis of the stock that you have. And I'll show you this on the next screen, but there's a slight difference in the tax rate. Now, I will just caveat all this by saying a lot of advisors make this seem extremely complicated, like an amazing benefit. Voya makes it seem like it's this amazing benefit. And there are some benefits to it, but I want to talk about where it's actually applicable, because don't jump on the NUA bandwagon until you've actually done some analysis on this. And I would also recommend talk to a CPA, talk to a tax professional as well. We have a whole tax team in-house you can talk to, but I would absolutely talk to your tax folks before you make this decision. So here's an example of NUA. Let's say your total Voya balance is $3 million. You've got $500,000 in Exxon stock. You've got $2 million in equity units, for example, and you've got $500,000 in common assets. Let's just say out of that Exxon stock where you've got $500,000 of your money, The cost basis, what you paid, was 200,000. And then let's just say that leaves a gain of 300,000. That's the capital gain or the NUA piece of the 500,000. When you use NUA, it's called utilizing NUA at the distribution point. 200,000, that cost basis that you paid for the stock, is going to be issued as ordinary income, which can be taxed at higher tax rates. And then the gain, the 300,000, gets taxed at capital gains rates. But remember, a lot of people are starting to fall now in that 15% capital gains rate plus the 3.8% Obamacare tax, which gets you pretty darn close to 20%. In most cases, federal tax, even on 300,000 in income, you're probably in that 20% effective, sometimes even lower, depending on your tax incentives and deductions. So the difference a lot of times with NUA is maybe 2 to 3%. In some cases, it can be 10%. But again, it's not this major windfall that people sometimes make it out to be. That's why I'd say before you make this decision, do an investment decision before you do a tax decision. And we like to say, don't let the tax tail wag the investment dog. And so if you really want to hold 500,000 in Exxon stock, which is a considerable amount of this $3 million example portfolio, make sure that you actually want to be in that much Exxon stock first. And I, by the way, I think the stock's going to do really well. I think it's going to do fine. But we would recommend that you diversify, whether you're at Exxon or any company, whether you're at NVIDIA, Microsoft, or JP Morgan, or any company out there. We just want you to diversify as you get closer to retirement. So again, NUA may work for you and it may work out very well, but make the investment decision first. That's the key. Let's go on to what's called the in-plan Roth conversion. These also get overcomplicated, so let's make this very simple. Right now, on the Voya savings plan, which is classified as a 401k, the IRS sets a bunch of different limits of what you can put in and how much of that is going to be tax deferred, and then how much of that would be not tax deferred. So let me go through a couple examples. I think this will make a lot of sense here in a second. But the general idea is that if you start to get to the point where you're at $350,000 in income, why do I say 350? That's what the IRS caps from a pre-tax basis that Exxon can actually match you. So remember, Exxon's matching you at 7%. That 7% on a pre-tax basis only applies to $350,000 of your income. Now, if you make over $350,000, you're still going to get your match, but it's just not pre-tax. It's actually going to go to a supplemental 401k that gets paid out to you as income after you retire. So one of the problems that some of our more highly compensated Exxon families run into is they want to save. They're putting in, let's just say, a 10 or 12% contribution, and they're having this money that's in excess of the IRS limits start to add up into the after-tax account. So some of you have seen this now. You've seen your before-tax contributions. You've seen the general account. That's the match. And then you've seen the Roth account, plus you've seen the after-tax account. The after-tax account is what's building up as time goes on in excess of what the IRS limits say you can put in. So here's a very easy example. Let's say you're 50 years old, which means you're over the catch-up contribution amount, and you're making about $350,000. You're putting in 12%. You're going to have about $31,000 now with the catch-up contribution that's going to end up in the pre-tax account. That's all pre-tax money. It's going to get rolled over to a traditional IRA eventually. You're also going to get a $24,500 company match that's going to end up in that general account. But you naturally have around 11% or $11,000, excuse me, going into after tax. Now, your contributions to after tax are always your money. You can pull those out with no issue. The problem is the earnings. So the longer and longer that the after-tax balance grows, you're going to start to see these earnings come in. Those eventually will be taxable. And so instead of letting the money grow up in after-tax, what we would like to do is convert that every single year over to the in-plan Roth conversion side of the portfolio. Now, before you do this, don't rush and do this until you talk to your tax professional or talk to our tax team, because if you've got a major balance sitting in after tax now, let's say you have $200,000 and your post-1986 contributions are around $100,000, essentially your cost basis, you could have an extensive tax liability due. if you do this the wrong way or do it in the wrong year. So don't do any of this without talking to your own professionals. I just wanted to give you an example of why it can be important and beneficial to do this Roth in plan conversion every year, because the IRS caps entire contribution limits for the year at 77,500 when you're over age 50. So just something to be aware of. Now, let's talk about some of the pension plan options and choices. Number one, that most of our Exxon families will do is take the 100% lump sum option that gets rolled over to a traditional IRA, assuming it's just the basic pension plan. Now, if you are highly compensated, meaning you're making over 350 grand, again, we go back to that IRS rule. If you make over 350 grand, you may have two additional pensions that exist. You may have a supplemental and a non-qualified pension. Those do not get rolled into a traditional IRA. They get paid out as ordinary income and taxed at the time of distribution. So these are some caveats you need to be aware of. But for the most of your pension, depending on where you're at from a compensation standpoint, it will be rolled into a traditional IRA. Now, you can also take a partial lump sum. You can take an 100% annuity option in one of the many choices, but most people will ultimately take the lump sum. Why? Because they don't necessarily need all that income from day one, and they can put an income strategy together on their own. Now, there are cases where it will make sense to take an annuity, but you need to talk about that with your advisor. We can help you with that decision too. Now, let's go on to the very most important step. You got to take your cube pick. So here's the my cube pick, and of course, you've seen many of your colleagues do this on campus. Very exciting to announce your actual last day, and you will eventually do this one of these days as well. I want to give you some real steps of what happens right after you take your cube pick. So here's an example. And we'll go through a few iterations of this, but the first few weeks of retirement, let's just say this person has a Voya 401k of about $3 million. They've got pre-tax in general of $2.5 million. Let's just say they've been converting over from after tax to the in-plan Roth conversion account. They've got $500,000 in a Roth. Then we're going to say their pension plan is about $1.5 million. And let's just say this person has additional savings. They've done a really nice job investing and saving, and they have $500,000. Our client custodian is Charles Schwab. Let's just say they've got $500,000 at Schwab as well in a brokerage account. So they've got total investable assets of about $5 million. Now, let's look at where all this money ends up. So $5 million in retirement assets. They've got $4 million, let's just say, that's going to go to the traditional IRA at Charles Schwab. We're also going to open up a Roth IRA for them. That's a $500,000 Roth, and the brokerage accounts are going to stay the same. Now, typically for most of our Stenger Family Office clients, we're going to recommend that they have anywhere from 3 to 5 years of living expenses in their plan on the overall investable bucket, and keep that money safe and secure. Now, typically that equates to 20%. For example, on a $5 million portfolio, but it's going to vary based on your situation. I have clients who spend a lot and we need a little bit more, clients that don't spend much at all, like most of our families, and they don't need quite 20%. But just as a ballpark, we are going to recommend that you have about 80% in equities and about 20% in safe 30-day treasuries at roughly $1 million in this case. Now, let's just say this person's over the age of 59 and a half. We're going to take that Schwab traditional IRA. We're going to roll over a good chunk of the almost all the 401k, the entire pension. And let's just say we've got $4 million in this traditional IRA. We want to generate our income. We want to have our safe assets in most cases, not in every case, but in most cases in this IRA account. Why? Because I see a lot of people holding CDs, holding treasuries in taxable accounts. They don't need all that income, but the interest now is 4%. So it's a lot. And they're generating that interest, paying tax on it in a taxable account. We'd rather have you do that after 59 and a half in an IRA account where you've got tax deferral. So we'll have growth and income, a mix of the two within that traditional IRA. And then we've got Schwab, we've got the Roth IRA. That's going to be exclusively growth oriented. Why? Because that's the last thing you're going to touch. Hopefully you don't touch it at all during your retirement. You pass it to the next gen. There's some great tax benefits of doing that. Same thing with the Schwab brokerage accounts. Not quite as good as the Roth IRA, but kids are going to end up inheriting that money at a stepped up cost basis. So typically speaking, we're going to have that money very growth oriented because you're not touching that bucket, just like you're not touching the Roth. You're taking your withdrawals in this example from the traditional IRA. So let's say we're taking a 5% withdrawal before Social Security kicks in. for example, we're about 60 years old, haven't had Social Security yet. So we're going to need $250,000 per year gross. So that's your before tax distribution. Let's just say, roughly speaking, you're going to pay about 50,000 in federal taxes, not tax advice. So consult your individual tax person. But we're going to take out about 50,000 in taxes. That's all withheld for you by our team at Charles Schwab. And then you're going to receive $200,000 throughout the year. Now, some people will take that as a lump sum and then we just send it right to their bank and they distribute as they like. I would say most people, and the better way to do it is have us send you money every single month. So it feels like a paycheck. It feels like you've never stopped working. Now, in this case, we're going to have just under $17,000 a month net after taxes are withheld that are going to go to this person's bank account. It could be literally any bank that you have in place right now, so that rain or shine, you know that money's coming. There's never going to be any interruption in your income. That's why one of the big questions that we start out with when we do the financial plan for you is, how much net income do you see to your account per month? That's what we want to replicate when you actually get to retirement. When Social Security comes in, it'll change the game a little bit. But for now, this person before age 62, before Social Security would potentially come in, we're going to have to take out roughly a 5% draw. Now, let's go to somebody who's under 59 and a half, and let's just say retired at 55 or somewhere in between there and 59. And what we're going to recommend, very similarly to what we had in the last example, is that they're going to be about 80-20 across the board. But the place that we generate that income and generate the growth versus the income assets is going to slightly change. So one of the differences is we're going to utilize the rule of 55 at Voya. We're not going to roll the entire Voya 401k over, because we know we can take out some money each year without a 10% early withdrawal penalty if we leave some of that money alone and don't roll it out to a traditional IRA. In that case, we're going to say, all right, the safe money in this portfolio is $1 million. That's that 20% number we discussed. We're going to leave that at Voya. And I would recommend most of that would just be common assets. Why? So rain or shine for the next 3 or 4 years, you know you've got that money set aside and you don't have to sell any equities when the market's down. Sometimes we end up at 800,000 or 900, but that's a personal decision. Then we're going to roll about $3 million to that Schwab traditional IRA. We don't need to be safe there. We've already got our safe money at Voya. We're going to go growth oriented. Same thing with the Roth, same thing with the brokerage account. Now, one of the caveats operationally is that when we call to do what's called a partial rollover from Voya, and we're leaving about $1 million in common assets, we're going to take that first year distribution. Let's say it was 250,000 and then 200,000 net after tax. We're going to move that 200,000 to your brokerage account at Schwab, and in most cases also have that money safe and secure. Why? Because that's what you need for the next 12 months of living expenses. So one of the differences with what happens before 59 and a half is we are going to have some safe money in that brokerage account at Schwab, which is a different way of doing things after you hit 59 and a half. Why? Because you're going to have a place to take that money. So a couple of key points here. One, we leave a few years of safe money at Voya. Number two, we withdraw the lump sum each January typically until you hit 59 and a half. So we'll call Voya together and take our one-time distribution typically in January and then send that safe money to Schwab. And then number three, we'll withhold the tax at Voya as opposed to withholding it at Schwab so that you're all set. You don't have any big surprise tax bills or penalties. And then lastly, we're going to set up monthly distributions from Schwab from that money market to whatever bank that you have on file with us. Here's a helpful table that I think explains the withdrawal rate, and then we'll finish with a couple of last points. But the withdrawal rate over time, whether you start at a 4% withdrawal or a 5% withdrawal, is really important to understand the math behind it. It's not that you take your ending account balance at the end of every single year and multiply it by 4% or multiply it by 5%, but rather you take your starting amount of assets, multiply it by your withdrawal rate. Let's say in this case, it's 5%. And then you're going to inflate that withdrawal rate by the rate of inflation compounded each and every year. So rather than taking the ending balance and multiplying it by 5%, you increase the rate of the money that's taken out on a compounded basis. That's very, very important to understand. So here's a very basic example of this. And I used $1 million because it's an easy number. But let's say we start out with $1 million. In this case, we're taking a 5% draw. We're getting a 7% rate of return. We're going to end that first year at $1,016,000. And then we're going to inflate the 50,000 by about 2.5 to 3%, depending on the year. And then we're going to do it all again. We're going to have a 7% return. And by the end of the second year, we're just slightly ahead of where we started, about $32,000 ahead. Now, when you do that after 10 years, you should have more than you started with, which is really the key of what we try to do for our clients, is to keep them in line with inflation plus a little cushion over the course of a 30-year retirement. If you stick to your withdrawal rate and you're allocated the right way where you can have the net math of the portfolio account for inflation each year, you should end at the end of the 30 years at least break even on a nominal basis. And so that's really important to understand the withdrawal rate behind the plan. That's why we put this together. And I can send this to you as well if you'd like to see the entire deck. Let's talk about how you actually put this all together, and then we'll wrap up. Number one, Stenger Family Office creates your customized retirement plan. Number two, it's your job to select your retirement and benefit commencement dates. We can help you with that. We can help you time out interest rates, which can make an impact, or when your next birthday is going to be, or whether it should be at the end of the year or the beginning of the year. But that's your decision. And then number three, we walk you through the pension, healthcare, and life insurance options, all of which are going to be through Alight. And we're going to help you decide what do you actually need to keep from a benefit standpoint when you retire, and then where are you going to have your pension check sent to? Your pension check will get sent to your house. We don't have an overnight option on that, and we can't send it directly to Charles Schwab. It does have to come to your house. On Voya and the 401k, this is the last piece, number 5. After we have your accounts opened up at Schwab, then we're going to call Voya together after you retire, so after your last day and really after your last payroll is made. We're going to request a rollover in most cases from Voya. Those checks can be sent overnight to your house, and I would recommend doing that in most cases. It's a lot of money to have sitting in the mail. Let's go to our next page here. For our Stenger Family Office clients, meaning $2 million or more in investable assets, we bundle together some tax benefits for you and estate planning benefits all in one package deal. So one, we're always managing the investment portfolio according to your goals, a goals-based plan rather than a risk-based plan. That's really important. We're not just going to ask you a risk tolerance survey and questionnaire. We actually want to find out what are you trying to accomplish and then tailor the portfolio according to your individual goals. And then when you have 2 million or more, we give you an annual engagement bonus towards tax, which will cover the cost of basic tax preparation and estate planning, which doesn't cover the entire cost of estate planning, but it at least offsets it a bit for you. And then we are checking in regularly throughout the year and doing strategy meetings. We do tons of education and events and webinars and events at our offices in Baton Rouge and Spring, Texas there. And you are welcome to attend any and all of those. So that's how we set it up. If you'd like to take the next step, what I would recommend is just do a starter account. We can go as low as $1,000. In a lot of cases, if you have $100,000, we can just get you right into the same portfolio that you'd have at retirement, which can be a nice test run. But start small, try things out with our group, and that's how we built out our practice all these years. So we started out with $1,000 starter accounts in 1981. We never changed our investment minimum just to make it easy for you to get started today and start getting some good advice before you have the money at retirement. So I think that's really key to building a relationship. My contact information is here on the screen. Give me a call, shoot me an email directly. You can visit us online at stengerfamilyoffice.com. We have an entire webpage designated to our ExxonMobil families. And again, we have our offices here in Naperville, Spring, Texas, and Baton Rouge. Hope you reach out to us if you have any questions. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you so much for being on.